Welcome back to the world of survival horror as we check out Resident Evil 2. Development on Resident Evil 2 started only 1 month after the team finished the first game. The first version of the game was actually quite different from what would appear in the finished product. The original plot actually didn't involve Umbrella, and the two lead characters were Leon Kennedy and Elza Walker. Unlike Leon and Claire, Leon and Elza's stories were separate from each other. Both characters would also run into two supporting characters. Leon would team up with a fellow Raccoon City police officer, Marvin Brand, and later encounter a woman named Linda, who would eventually be redesigned as Ada Wong. Elza was aided by Sherry Birkin and a man named John, who ended up appearing in the final version of the game as the gun shop owner, who dies at the start of the game. Also, Resident Evil 2 was meant at the time to be the end of the series, if you can actually believe that. The story takes place 2 months after the Spencer Mansion went boom and Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine came back to Raccoon City, talking about the undead and Umbrella being behind it all. As you could expect, nobody believes them. Really should have taken back a zombie head. Just saying. Chris heads out to bring Umbrella to justice, while his sister Claire arrives in the city looking for him, when rookie police officer Leon Kennedy also heads into the city for his first day on the job. And after quickly learning that most of Raccoon City's citizens are, well, undead, Claire and Leon meet up only to split up and try to make their way out of the city. There's more cutscenes this time around, and thus there's more of an attempt here to tell a cohesive story. Both Leon and Claire encounter different characters and different situations. Leon runs into the mysterious Ada Wong, while Claire has to protect Sherry Birkin and learn more about the G-Virus. Both characters get bits and pieces of the overall story, which makes you want to see their journey to the end. Also, you need to complete the game with both characters in order to get the real ending. As in the first game, much of the backstory behind what's been happening in Raccoon City since the events of the first game can be found in books, letters, and other things. And once again, I recommend reading as much of this information as possible, as it really expands on the world and the characters around you. Both Leon and Claire play pretty much the same, and they both have the same number of inventory slots at the start. However, things you do in one story might affect the other. For example, while playing as Leon, I blew up the alligator boss with a gas canister, and thus Claire didn't have to do this in her story. You can also leave behind objects like a submachine gun, or an added inventory slot for the other character, or you can take them for yourself. Though that's about all you can really do to affect the other playthrough, which is kind of a disappointment. There are surprisingly a smaller number of bosses than what was seen in the first game, though there are different boss encounters depending on who you're playing as. Leon constantly runs into a mutated William Birkin, the creator of the G-Virus, while Claire constantly runs from Mr. X, a tyrant monster searching for Sherry. Both Leon and Claire will encounter Birkin in different stages of his mutation, and it's pretty cool to see his early human form and his final mutated one. While Birkin and Mr. X are your primary bosses, there are a bunch of new threats for you to deal with. Zombies, lickers, giant spiders, dogs, God I hate those damn dogs, plants, and crows all stand in your way, and thanks in part to the new game engine, there's a ton more zombies on screen than before. A lot more. The gameplay though has largely been untouched. Running around and searching for objects to solve puzzles, to get more objects, to solve more puzzles, to make more progress is still the name of the game. There are still limits on how many things you can carry with you, and there are still storage bins to help you drop off the items you don't want. And both mechanics are as fine or as frustrating as you remember them from the first game. A bigger change to the gameplay is that now there's not that much backtracking in comparison to the first game. You start off in the Raccoon City police station, but soon you'll make your way through a sewer and arrive at a chemical plant. And while you will backtrack through these areas, there is still a sense of forwards progression. Also, weapons can now be upgraded. If you're lucky, you'll come across the upgrades for the pistol and the magnum, which will help you out for the boss fights. The controls are just the same as last time, no difference whatsoever. You still move like a tank, and aiming while shooting is still limited to up and down. The controls are a bit tougher to work around, though this time in part to the boss fights. Most of the bosses have long-ranged attacks, and it can be hard to quickly move out of the way. The final battle with Claire and Mr. X is a perfect example of this, as Claire can't move fast enough even at full health. Also, thanks to the increase in zombies on screen, it can be a tad difficult to maneuver around them. The beginning of the game as Claire and Leon is horrible in this regards. The first time I ever played the game as Leon, I must have died 5 times before I even reached the police station. But like in the first game, the controls are either going to grow on you, or you'll just be frustrated by them in the long run. The presentation is quite nice from the first PlayStation game. Many of the rooms are not as bland as they were in the first game, and there are some nice details in some of the rooms. Character models are a bit blocky, but they have some nice details as well. Leon and Claire have changes to their outfits by the end of the game, with having bandages over his uniform and Claire removing her biker's jacket. The zombies are also nicely detailed, with some looking like cops, others looking like random citizens, and there are also a few female zombies walking around as well. Which now brings us to the voice acting. It's a bit awkward jumping from the remake of Resident Evil to this, since the voice acting in the remake wasn't so bad. And at least if you came from the original first PlayStation game, you're not prepared for the terrible voiceovers. Quite frankly put, the voice acting here is pathetic. The delivery is just horrid, with the actors slowly trying to drone out each word. Thankfully though, the dialogue is written better than it was in the first game. Anyone still hungry for a Jill sandwich? On the plus side, the soundtrack is just as awesome as it was in the first game, creating great atmospheres of tension and dread. Overall, Resident Evil 2 is not really a sequel that's going to win over any new fans. If you liked the first game, then you're going to like this one. And if you hated the first game, well, you see where I'm going with this. Resident Evil 2 doesn't change that much from the first game, but what new additions have been implemented are interesting. The parallel story and the gun upgrades make Resident Evil 2 unique from its predecessor. I generally like Resident Evil 2 slightly more than the first game due to the limited backtracking and the easier puzzles. So come back to see how Jill Valentine tries to escape from Raccoon City when we look at Resident Evil 3 Nemesis.